Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, the way too early ACC Power Rankings heading into 2025. Now, look, this is going to look different coming out of spring practice once that spring transfer portal window opens. But as we sit right now, heading into spring practice, how do these ACC teams stack up? Before the ACC fans, start yelling at me as we are going to inherently disagree about some of these rankings, I do want to start with two things that really stand out to me as I was stacking these teams. The ACC has been getting a lot of disrespect in the national media over the last couple of weeks, especially surrounding these college football playoff talks. I want to say two things. One, going into 2025, the quarterback play in this conference, the quarterback play last year in this conference was really damn good. I've got a lot of confidence in a lot of these quarterbacks going into the 2025 year, where I look at the Big Ten or I look at the SEC and say, there are some question marks about quarterback play in some of those conferences. Feel good about the quarterback play going into 2025 for a lot of these football teams. And secondly, Dill, I like some of these coaching staffs. I'm a huge fan of Rhett Lashley. I'm a huge fan of Brent Key. I'm a huge fan of Coach Brom. You know who I'm a huge fan of too is Manny Diaz at Duke. I like what he's doing as well. I like the coaching staffs for a lot of these programs as well. I'm not saying the ACC is on the same level as the Big Ten and the SEC. That was not what I meant to say there. But I am saying there are some things to like about this conference going into 2025. Now let's get into the yelling. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. It been a blast covering these teams in the portal. The amount of support y'all have shown the boys in the offseason, in the month of February, it's been amazing. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, let it fly in the comment section, especially the SMU fans. I got them in the tier below Miami and Clemson. We'll talk about it. Let me hear about it in the comment section. Dill, without further ado, I'm going to start with this. Did you agree that Clemson and Miami are kind of the clear two title contenders in this conference going into 2025?
And that does seem pretty clear to me right now, and I think you said it right. It's like SMU and Georgia Tech to me, for
Like
probably
them.
should throw Louisville in there too, are
Yeah.
probably the next three teams, and I would
Yep.
agree with that are kind of like pushing there. But you look at again just the makeup of those programs and how much turnover it feels like they each have each year, and probably not recruiting the way that Clemson and Miami and developing from in-house have been doing it. I just think you have more confidence in like year in and year out. You kind of know what you're going to get from
And
Miami.
and here's my biggest thing is you talked about the high school recruiting ranks. Where does that reflect the most when you get onto the football field? Line of scrimmage. You look at two of the best offensive lines that I think you'll see in this conference. I mean, Clemson and Miami, they just recruit. They've both done one. Clemson is returning a ton of talent on the offensive line. Miami's done a great job not only recruiting that talent out of the high school ranks, but also developing that. Yeah, you can talk about quarterback play and skill position play. The biggest thing that separates Clemson and Miami for me is what they've done along the lines of scrimmage. Because if you want to have good line of scrimmage playing college football, you got to recruit those bodies out of the high school ranks. It's hard to create good line of scrimmage play in the transfer portal. And you feel like kind of SMU and Louisville at times have kind of relied on that. I think that's why these two teams are separated for me. Now, here's the second question here. Clemson or Miami? Who's your pick to win the ACC as we head into spring practice?
I'm probably sitting here now with Clemson just because I look, this does feel like a year that they're really going to be able to take a swing. I think
Oh,
the
yeah.
defensive line, when you got two first rounders, really, really dominant football players, you got Sammy Brown at the linebacker spot. And then you have a youngish secondary, but a secondary
But
that I
it's
think you saw
the
some
secondary is low key kind of old now. Like we were talking about the secondary being young the last 2 years. Now all these guys are juniors and seniors, and you kind of feel good about
well,
it.
like, and I think you'll see some of their younger guys play, like at Hampton. Like I think he'll play a lot for them. I
He's
think he's
very
a
good.
really good player. So I think you have the mix of like Avion Terrell. Yes, now he is not a young player anymore. He is an incredible player. But then you do have some young guys cycling through who you're like, okay, I'm pretty interested, like Corey and Gibson. Like, what can he do with this team? Like, there are a mix of like real high end young talent with some really good vets. I just look Clemson right now, defense so wildly underperformed. I think you bring in Tom Allen,
That's
changes things to me. Like this Clemson team with the offense they had last year, which was pretty good, I think they're probably
you were going deep cut with the depth chart there. I was Tom Allen. You kind of buried the lead there. I think that's the biggest storyline. I mean, this
yeah.
Clemson defense is from a talent standpoint really good. They just didn't have a good defensive play caller. They bring in Tom Allen. You said the Clemson offense was pretty good. I think it's going to be really damn good. in the 2025 year. And
They
Dill, to
get
sum
one
it
of
up,
those good young running backs going, that'll be the missing piece, because it felt like at times last year they
agreed,
just couldn't run the ball at all, because
especially
not
in the
because their
late.
offensive line was bad, because their running back play was just subpar.
Well, they just ran out of running backs. I mean, Phil Maffa with the injury, and then Jay Haynes. They were trotting out Adam Randall, 6'3", 215 pounds, wide receiver, playing running back.
Didn't hit it.
Here's the on the surface level analysis for me. We've talked in depth about both of these teams. I feel like Clemson right now has less question marks than Miami. I think Miami's a college football playoff team. I've been very vocal about that. I think Clemson might be a top 4 team in the country. Where the question marks for Miami is, there's just a lot of new faces on the defense, not only from a personnel standpoint, from a coaching staff standpoint. I'm confident it had to happen. How quickly is it going to mesh is probably one question. Then secondly, hey, do we have those elite pass catchers around Carson Beck? You certainly might, but it's certainly a question mark going into spring practice where you look at Clemson and say that those starting 3 wide receivers, Wesco, TJ Moore, and Antonio Williams, it might be one of the best trios that we see in the country. And so for me, just there's more answers right now for Clemson than there is Miami. 2 really good football teams. SMU. This is where I think the SMU fans are probably pissed at me, and kind of rightfully so. SMU is really good in 2024, made the college football playoffs. Kevin Jennings is the reason this team's the number 3 team in the conference. Kevin Jennings was freaking awesome in the 2024 year. They have difference makers on the outside. I trust Rhett Lashley a lot in terms of making this offense good. My question mark here, nobody really talked about it because Rhett Lashley and because of Kevin Jennings. This Clemson or SMU front 7 was elite. It was top 10 unit against the run in the country. They lose a lot of those guys. And yes, they did go to the transfer portal and try to fill in some of that production that's moving on. But to me, it's hard for me to sit here and say that front 7 is going to be even close to what it was. It might be close, but it's not going to be what it was, in my opinion, in 2024. Because of that, I knocked him down to the teams to watch. But when you have Kevin Jennings at quarterback, you are going to be a team that's competing for an ACC championship.
That even because even that is like, it feels almost disrespectful to some of the offensive guys they're going to lose. Like Rashad Smith was really good
Awesome,
for them.
yeah.
I felt like kind of opened some things up with just how athletic he was and how dynamic he was out of the backfield in terms of like creating space for that whole offense. Like they're losing a lot of production, both at the wide receiver spot. I think Rashad
Yep.
Smith meant like they're returning some good players up front, which is obviously really helpful for a
They've
team that
done. What I will say is, like, they SMU knows the recipe here. Hey, we can recruit some of the high school talent out of high school and some of the skill talent. The line of script, one, they landed 5-star offensive lineman in this 2025 cycle. That should fire up a lot of SMU fans. Still, secondly, they hammer the line of scrimmage in the portal. And I was getting up here early saying, like, it's hard to use the transfer portal to build really good line of scrimmage play. SMU, I think, knows it's hard. And so we're going to take a lot of swings on former Power 4 guys on the line of scrimmage in the transfer portal. And it has been a recipe that has worked for Lashley. Georgia Tech, that's a team that I think you like a lot. I certainly do too. What, am I too low on Georgia Tech, or how are we feeling about them?
I honestly look at like Georgia Tech, like they're starting to put together a program. I feel like is starting to like they're gathering the resources. I feel like they need to be more competitive. They're starting to recruit the high school ranks well. They're keeping their good players for the most part well. Obviously, losing Robinson at the left tackle spot certainly hurts. Like that's a guy you wish you could have kept. Singleton, like, is what it is. I feel like there was a chance that was going to happen either way. But I look at, again, they're keeping a good chunk of that offensive line. They played really good football last year. Obviously, Jamal Haynes and Haynes King coming back can be a real dynamic.
Here's what there are things you like and question marks you have. The things I like is Haynes King, even with an injury that really, I mean, they weren't really throwing the football with him for majority part of that 2024 year. Haynes King, a healthy Haynes King's a very, very good quarterback that can be a difference maker at the quarterback spot. There's a difference between solid quarterbacks and guys that can be difference makers and go elevate your offense. Haynes King's one of those guys. And their Buster Faulkner, I think the world of him in terms of scheming up an offense around Haynes King. Talk about Buster Faulkner and how good of an OC he is and retaining it. I mean, Dill, to me, you had a quarterback that really couldn't throw, and you still schemed up an offense that was producing. My biggest question is I really like Tyler Santucci too. And he's now not with the program, one linebackers coach with Baltimore, I believe. That's my question mark with Georgia Tech. Louisville, I'll let you take the wheel here because I know you're not as high on Louisville as I am, and so we're probably going to argue about it. How are we feeling about Louisville here?
Louisville is tough for me, frankly, because I am like high on them, but I just the way they're going about their business, I'd say, as a program as a whole, and how far along I feel like Jeff Brom is into it, I do feel like they're far too reliant on the portal at this point. Now, again, I look at this team and what it can be this year. I don't think I'm low on them heading into this year because I look, Miller Moss was a huge get out of the portal. That's a quarterback that was far more maligned than he should have been. Like USC,
Agreed.
I felt like tried to pin all their issues on him.
Yeah.
Didn't consider the fact that their offensive line was totally inept. They didn't like. I didn't feel like the play calling was always great. It felt like they'd go away from the run and try to have him throw the ball 50 times. That's not something Brom's going to have a problem with this year because they do have a really good running game. I think the offensive line should be good. That's been a program, and I'm a anti-offensive line portal guy. For whatever reason,
hit.
they hit the portal every
They
year
hit.
for the offensive line, and they put
Yeah.
out really good
See,
offense.
that's my fundamental problem with you just blindly hitting Louisville's process in terms of building this roster because we've seen it happen for 2 years now, and their
That is fair
evaluations.
because I've been saying this for 2 straight years, and 2 straight years he's proven me wrong. So again, do I feel like it's sustainable? No, but they're making it happen. And I look with those two running backs they have this year and like their ability to probably work off of play action and be able to hit some big plays if a wide receiver can step up. And obviously you get Colin Lacey back from the injury and hopefully he's full go. If he is, and they can be again, run the ball like they did last year and probably do it a little bit better with those two young running backs and then work off of play action, hit some big ones. I think that would suit Miller Moss a little better. I think they can be a good offense working that way. But
I have no question marks about the offense. My bigger question mark is, I mean, they graduated double-digit seniors from that Louisville defense. Multiple guys in that two deep in the front seven, and some really good football players like Ashton Gelati. I like the linebackers. Probably have question marks about how good this defensive line will be. And you go back to Louisville in 2023, what made that team so dangerous is, yeah, they had a solid offense. You're always going to have a solid offense with Coach Ron. That defense, that front seven was dominant. I just don't know if we'll see that level of dominance in the 2025 year.
I will
Florida,
say I like Clev Lubin. I think Clev Lubin can be a very interesting player. If they have a really good pass rusher to kind of replace what Gelati was doing for them, I think that'd go a long way in solving some of those issues. Because you are right. Again, they're going to lose basically that whole defense. It feels
whole
like
front seven, man.
that's really hard to do when you're not recruiting probably the way I think Jeff Brom and Louisville should be right now.
I think you might just be taking that to your grave. You can be like 50
Oh,
years old
hey,
and be like, you're
no,
from
no,
not
no.
the right way.
Again, and we'll see. It's obviously only been 2 years, but again, it's hard to recruit really good defensive linemen consistently and hit. I think Florida State just kind of figured that out in their own right. So to me, it doesn't feel like a totally sustainable model, but they've been
How
really
many
good.
good seasons? How many good seasons does Jeff Brom need to stack before you say, "All right, I'm buying"?
Five.
Five. See, you're just getting your runway. You're just building your runway. I don't blame you. Can't be wrong. Can't be wrong if you say 5 years. We'll just forget your takes from 5 years from now. All right, Florida State. This is high for Florida State, right? I think I'm a little, and it's not like I feel like we just kind of forget. Like, look, Florida State has been stacking. They should have been recruiting better, but they have been recruiting better than a lot of these other teams in the ACC. I feel like Thomas Castellanos gives them a solid floor. Like, I'm not picking Florida State to win the ACC, but from a talent standpoint, they're going to have a chance to be dangerous. Now, it really cratered on them in 2024. I still think it's a solid enough roster. To me, the biggest thing here is the new coaching staff. I'm so much more optimistic about the coaching staff than it was 12 months ago. I think they need to eat their vegetables this year and just try to build a solid team and just kind of be solid before they can kind of get back to where they belong as that title contender tier. But I think they put the roster together to do that.
And also a little bit more proven guys out of the portal. Like last year, I felt like they
Five
took a
guys
lot
that
of
are solid.
almost like flame out high school recruits. Like, okay, this kid was a 5-star from Alabama. Like, we're just going to take him and like believe in the potential. And I look at this year, like taking guys like that Wake Forest center, like just a really solid player, been around for a while.
Dog.
So it's like that type of player I feel like is more prevalent on the roster. So I don't think they have a particularly high ceiling. It doesn't feel like right now. Maybe they do have some of their young talent hits because you have said it, like they're recruiting hasn't probably been good enough, but it's been better than most teams in the ACC. But I don't know that they have the same ceiling, but I do think you'll get a little more steady play than what you had
That's
last
that's 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 kind of my take on them too. Is they went instead of what you were saying, I'm just gonna go for like guys that were good out of high school that haven't played any college football and they all kind of busted. And then we went to the G5 levels and got some just really quality football players that I don't know if they give you that ACC championship ceiling, but you ain't gonna go 2-10 with those guys either. Duke, Darian Mensah, and Manny Diaz. Like Darian Mensah got a bag to go to Duke, and he was really good out of Tulane. And like Malik Murphy was solid, but what they're telling me is they think Darian Mensah can be significantly better, and if he is, this Duke team could be a team to watch in the ACC. Dill, going to this next tier down the list, what teams do you want to highlight? I mean, I feel like we got to start with North Carolina and Bill Belichick. Two things that I'll note here. You certainly just want to see Bill Belichick coach at the collegiate ranks before you just start talking about him being the greatest coach of all time. Like I do think there's fundamentally different things when you're coaching grown men versus college athletes. So you want to see that. It's the hardest team to handicap going into the 2025 year. Mac Brown did a solid job recruiting. It was a top 5 ACC recruiting program. So I do think the talent is probably better than what we think, but they lose a lot. There's just a lot of turnover. There's a lot of change going on. And when I looked at that roster, I think it's a solid roster in the ACC, but with so much uncertainty, kind of just like close my eyes and just put them right in the middle of the pack of the ACC.
Yeah, that's tough because honestly, that's probably more of an indictment on a team like a Virginia Tech that it felt like they had a chance to really grab some momentum last year, and they put together a really disappointing year, have a lot of attrition in the portal.
Yeah.
Pitt's just a team that I think you're probably too low on them. I'd probably have them closer up. They've been pretty dependable for the past couple of years. Again, I don't think they have much of a ceiling, if you will, but it's been
Well,
a
so
dependable, productive squad. I feel like I'd probably have them as like my top ranked outside looking in, just because I have more belief in what they've been doing. But it'd be probably more of an like BC, Syracuse, like those rosters. I just look at them like they're not what they probably need to be really competitive.
we'll talk about those. I got some takes. Pitt's an interesting. I love the Cade Bell hire, and Pitt was kind of a sneaky good team until some injuries kind of crept up with them last year. Like Cade Bell, I think I like Eli Holstein. I love the running back Desmond Reed. Like they got some guys, and Nardu's going to put out a good defense. But you're kind of right. Like the ceiling, you just kind of question. And then Virginia Tech, yeah, they just, in my opinion, probably missed their shot last year. But Kyron Jones offers a ceiling that I don't think many quarterbacks in this conference offer. Cal's interesting because they got 2 quarterbacks coming into place. Mendoza, 2 former 5-stars, one Devin Brown, or Devin Brown's going into year 4, I believe, from Ohio State, maybe even year 5. He's talented. And they have a freshman, Jaron Kiwi Sagaputele, that can rip it. What do they get from the quarterback position is probably the question. Boston College. Here's the team I want to focus on, Syracuse. They won 10 games last year. And I think there's a lot of Cuse fans that are looking at you, call yourself the Rock Boys from Rochester, New York, and you're hating on Syracuse. Dill, they had that all. It's hard for me to see that offense being even close to what it was last year. But Kyle McCord was one of the most productive passers that you saw in the country last year. They had some really good pass catchers, highlighted by Pena and Rhonda Gaston, who are now moving on. How does that? And I don't know if like Colin Hurley's the guy that
You've seen almost nothing, right? It's tough to like really put that much stock because again, I look at how dependent they were on just being able to throw the ball really effectively because the rest of that team probably wasn't. I mean, the defense didn't feel like a great unit. Was that offense a particularly great unit aside from the fact that they could really rip it and throw the ball all around? Probably not. So again, you lose like the focal point of.
Okay, I got to correct myself. It's Ricky Collins. Getting my LSU quarterback stat transferred to Syracuse off. Ricky Collins transferred in. My thing is that's going to be a downgrade. I think you have to assume. You're downgraded at the wide receiver positions for an offense that was so reliant on throwing the football last year. It's hard for me to see the passing attack even being close to what it was last year. And I just don't see enough difference makers on the defense to tell me that defense gets better. Last team I want to highlight, Wake Forest. I like that you have to replace a guy like Dave Clawson, who I think figured it out at Wake. Look, I'm a Wake Forest alum. I know it ain't easy to win football games at Wake Forest. And Dave Clawson figured it out. Hey, we're going to recruit these developmental prospects. We're going to redshirt them, develop them. And by year 4, year 5, they're going to be solid football players. Now, what was difficult for Wake Forest is when that transfer portal became kind of a thing is you put all this development into some of these players that you bet on out of high school. And by year 4, when they emerge as good football players, you got teams coming in and taking them. And so Jake Dicker comes in, uses the transfer portal much more than Dave Clawson did. And I think Coach Dicker is probably the best hire Wake Forest could have made. And then you look at Deshaun Purdy and Robbie Ashford at quarterback, like they're not great quarterbacks, but they're really dynamic and you can do some fun things with them. I kind of like this Wake Forest team. I'm not sure if it's good enough to put them in that like title contender, even like upper echelon of the ACC.
No,
Watch
but
out
he's
for
going
them.
to make them more aggressive and like try to win at a higher level. I felt like Dave Clawson, like you almost something had to give with him because he wasn't going to embrace the new kind of way of doing things. I do feel like Jake Dicker is going to come in and try to mobilize kind of everything behind being competitive. So I don't think this year it's going to obviously change over a whole lot, or they're going to be particularly competitive now. But at least directionally, it probably had to happen that you get a coach like Jake Dicker who wanted to again, almost like work the way you need to work and embrace the new way of doing things the way you needed to do it. That frankly, Clausen never felt like he was going to try to do.
Yeah, agreed. All right, we'll sign out there. That's the ACC. I feel like it's going to be kind of. I feel like you got 2 lead dogs, but you got some teams to watch in this conference going into 2025. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later.